Hi, everyone. My name is Maris Kreisman, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you tonight to another excellent virtual event at McNally Jackson. If you go to mcnallyjackson.com and look at our events calendar, you'll see all the amazing writers and programs we're hosting in the coming weeks. So please keep an eye on the site or subscribe to our newsletter to hear more about what's coming soon. There will be time at the end of tonight's conversation for your questions, so start thinking about them now. You can put all of your questions into the Zoom chat at any time, and I'll get to them towards the end of the evening. We're glad that even though we can't all be in the same room at the moment, we're still able to host events during this difficult time. As we weathered the pandemic and reopened all 4 of our locations for browsing and shopping, indie bookstores like ours still need more support. And so if you enjoy free events like this one and want us to keep hosting more of them, please buy books from us. Throughout the evening, I'll post links in the chat to buy Speak Okinawa by Elizabeth Miki Brina and Spilt Milk by Courtney Zoffness from McNally Jackson. And I am so delighted to welcome them both tonight for what promises to be a great event and conversation. Elizabeth Miki Brina is the recipient of a Rona Jaffe Breadloaf Scholarship and a New York State Summer Writers Institute Scholarship. She currently lives and teaches in New Orleans. And again, the name of her book is Speak Okinawa. And Courtney Zoffness won the Sunday Times Short Story Award, an Emerging Writers Fellowship from the Center for Fiction, residency fellowships from the MacDowell Colony, and the Susan Adifat Prize in Creative Nonfiction from Arts and Letters. Her work has appeared in the Paris Review Daily, the Southern Review, Long Reads, LARB, and elsewhere, and she had notable Best American Essays in 2018 and 2019. She teaches at Drew University and lives with her family in Brooklyn, New York. And you're both going to start us off with some readings, yes?
Yes.
Great.
Elizabeth, you want to go first? I'll just start by saying thank you so much, Maris and McNally Jackson, for hosting us. Yes, let's hold up each other's books. Whee! And we're only disappointed that we can't be there in person. I really, miss all the time I spent in bookstores. I'm sure everyone here relates. So thank you, Maris and McNally Jackson. Elizabeth, do you want to read first, or would you prefer I do?
I can read first. Thank you so much for having us.
And I'll just add also that I'm really excited to be in conversation with Elizabeth. Her book blew me away, and I really wasn't familiar with it until I read your memoir, and I just want everybody to read this book.
I can't wait. Thank you. So I'm reading from a chapter called The Gray City, and it takes place on the morning of my mother's baptism. And I'll just begin. Is it bad luck to rain on baptism? My mother asks, peering through the blinds of the window of her bedroom, the master bedroom, with the nicest bed and the biggest TV and its own bathroom. She is wrapped in a towel, her skin and hair dripping wet from a shower. It is the middle of May. The weather is typical for this time of year in western upstate New York. Chilly, gray, clouds swollen with rain. Rochester is ranked 4th in the nation for cloudiest cities in America, with an average of 304 cloudy days a year. Rochester is called the Gray City, partly because of the perpetual overcast and partly because of the pervasive gloomy mood. Rochester originated as a boomtown, a hub for the flour milling industry, then later for the headquarters of Kodak, Xerox, and Bausch & Lomb, but these companies also fell out of favor and relevance. Growing up, before I graduated from high school, before I moved away to Boston, I sensed that Rochester was a city on the demise, a city hoping and pretending to be on the verge of some of the greatness it had once promised itself. I heard about the layoffs of thousands of employees. I heard about the factories shutting down, the local restaurants and shops shutting down, replaced by franchises and gleaming new sections of department stores at Eastview Mall. I heard about retired professionals and college graduates competing for jobs at Barnes & Noble and Staples, barbers selling haircuts for $5. I saw the residents getting older and older, no more kids strutting in packs on the sidewalks, loitering under bridges, jumping from the spans of bridges into the Erie Canal. And that is how I'll always remember Fairport and the rest of Rochester, as a place of steady decline, a place of stagnation. No matter how many Trader Joe's and cheesecake factories and boutiques and craft beer breweries open for business. I suppose my parents still live here because I grew up here, because they want me to have a hometown, somewhere to remind me of who I was, even if I was someone who felt strange, wrong, out of place, somewhere that could be a fixed marker by which to track my progress. Sometimes I wonder if I would visit more than once or twice a year if they didn't live in Rochester. Rain is just bad luck for weddings, because weddings are usually outside, I guess. My mother nods. She unwraps the towel from her frail body and folds it around her head. She stands naked, lathering lotion on her arms and legs. My mother has always stood naked and comfortable in my presence. I've always been too embarrassed about my body, compared with hers, to reciprocate. I can see her sagging breasts, the thick red gash that begins at her belly button and disappears into her pubic hair, a cesarean scar. During labor, the umbilical cord twisted and tangled and choked my baby neck. I almost choked to death. My mother was terrified, traumatized. The reason, I am told, why she never wanted to have another child. What are you going to wear? She asks, balancing on one foot, slipping the other foot through the leg hole of a beige panty. Where? I toss around the clothes in the duffel bag I packed yesterday, a few hours before my flight was scheduled to depart. Pajamas, shapeless cotton dresses, worn cardigans with patches sewn over rips and tears. What are you gonna wear? She shows me the dress, long, black and white floral printed, silk. She slips her arms through the sleeves and pulls the dress over her head, adjusting. This look okay? I haven't seen my mother wear anything except black stretch pants and a white collared t-shirt on the days she works, or jeans and a t-shirt on the days she doesn't work. The obvious suddenly becomes apparent to me, and I realize how important this occasion must be for her. I panic. Fuck, fuck, fuck. What is it? What's the matter? I'm sorry, Mom. I forgot to bring something. I hold up a dress, nicer to wear. That's okay. No, Mom, it's not. Fuck. Do you want to buy a dress? You have plenty of time. She removes her wallet from her purse, then hands me a Macy's credit card and 12 coupons. One of them is 20% off. Mom, I don't need 12 coupons. I try to hand 11 of them back to her. Keep them. Take them with you to New Orleans. They have Macy's there, don't they? And here it comes. The guilt, delusion, surging, for not visiting often enough, for not calling enough, for not planning ahead and packing a nice dress, for not caring enough to plan ahead, for needing to use my mother's credit card because I can't afford to buy a nice dress on my own, for being a poor graduate student, foolishly and selfishly pursuing my dreams at the age of 33, at the same age she gave birth to me, for keeping these 11 extra coupons, knowing that I will never, ever use them. I drive 20 minutes to the next town, Victor. The sky is gray from rain. The grass and trees are glowing green from rain. I park in the parking lot of Eastview Mall by the Macy's entrance. As I walk through the parking lot, I remember how my mother used to take me to this mall on the days she didn't have to work. We would walk through this mall, in and out of stores, Aeropostale, American Eagle, Express, Gap. We barely spoke. I just rifled through racks and tried on clothes while she exchanged sizes and waited outside the fitting room. She bought me everything I wanted, no matter how much it cost. If I wanted it, she bought it. Hundreds of dollars she spent, all her tips from waitressing in one spree, week after week. I barely wore half those clothes. We barely spoke. I stop, stunned, in the parking lot. I cover my face with my hands. This is why I only visit once or twice a year. Then I take a deep breath. I ask myself, how can I make this right? How can I make this right now? I tell myself that today is about my mother. I have to be gracious and graceful for my mother. I have to buy a new dress. I have to tell myself this guilt. I tell myself this guilt is not her fault. I tell myself that maybe, just maybe, because this guilt is too much, maybe this guilt is not entirely my fault either. Maybe it starts before me. Maybe it starts before my mother. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so beautiful. The anti-climax of the Zoom post reading. like,
Yeah.
well, I love that section. I'm just going to read a bit from the opening. And while yours, the section you read is about being a daughter, mine is about being a mother. This is from the opening of Spilt Milk. It's called The Only Thing We Have to Fear. Here is my oldest son, age 5, at not quite 6 a.m. I can't go to school. His eyes are wild, lidless. I wrench out the worry like a splinter. His schoolmates have learned new things and he won't be able to follow. We've been out of town. He has missed Monday's class. I rub his back, offer reassurances. Maybe he'll feel better after breakfast, I say. When I head to the kitchen, he slams his bedroom door, bars himself inside. Don't make me go. Mommy and Daddy would never suggest you do something that's a bad idea, I say, and wonder if it's true. He barely removes the thumb from his mouth as I pull a shirt over his head. I lure him out of the house with a lollipop. Midway into the 6-minute walk, his panic mounts. What time is it? He says. Am I late? He takes off down the sidewalk. Honey, you're not late, I call. I catch up with him at the intersection, a network of strollers and scooters and clasped hands. He is doubled over. I have to poop, he says. School's across the street. We'll go to the second floor bathroom, I say. No, he screams and stamps his feet. He is wearing light up shoes. We drift upstairs with the crowd and I report him present to his teacher while he twists beside me in visceral discomfort. He agrees to use the toilet only if I wait outside the bathroom, but any relief I feel over this deal dissipates when he reemerges seconds later, pants at his ankles. I don't have to go anymore, he says, zipping up his fly. Are you sure? Want to just sit for a minute and see? I can't, he says, and hurries to class. Later, he will tell my husband that he was secretly sobbing in bed before he called out to us that morning, that he knew it was silly, but couldn't stop. A memory. My brother and I sourcing scrap wood from a yard of a home that has recently burned down. We want to build a treehouse. I spot a square just the right size for a floor, but it turns out that in the blaze, the lawn has transmuted into thick, sticky mud, and it suctions my shoes, envelops my calves. A few yards away, my brother is swallowed up to his knees. He screams. I'm older, the designated protector. Panic saturates my chest. And then, as if only to test my tolerance, a blue van pulls up. Kidnappers drive blue vans. We have been warned to steer clear. A pale man with a splotchy beard pokes his head out the window. Can I help? We are perfect prey, stuck in a muddy trap on a quiet cul-de-sac around the corner from home, out of our parents' view. I holler and squirm and somehow tug off my shoes and force my way to the dry edge of the property. I am crying. My brother is bawling. Young lady, the man repeats, need help? I need my father, but retrieving him will mean leaving my brother alone with a strange man. My brother is heaving so hard I can't understand him. Is he saying go or no? Have I just imagined that the mud is higher on his waist, his body lower in the earth, the driver's pointed teeth? I back up slowly, then quickly, then sprint home in socked feet, screaming, frantic, bellowing for my father to come, hurry, danger, death. The kidnapper is gone when we return. My brother is not. My father, in his trusty Timberlands, tugs my brother free. I want to put my son at ease, to talk about his behavior. On the flip side, I don't want to make too big a deal of his sensitivities, don't want him to worry about his worry. How to calibrate this? Isn't it natural not to want to feel left out? He had a fine day at school, he tells me afterward, followed along just fine. At home, he is back to his upbeat self, playing Legos with his little brother, singing a song about sharks. He takes a bath, reads to me from Frog and Toad. I pet his hair, consider the skull beneath it, the brain beneath that, how soft it is, how susceptible. I hum a lullaby. He jolts upright. What if I can't find my classroom? He says. What? Parents can't go upstairs with their kids in first grade. What if I don't know where to go? Inhale, exhale. First grade is 7 months away. We'll visit ahead of time, I say. You won't get lost, okay? The whites of his eyes glow in the dark. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you for reading. I love that essay so much. It's the first essay, and it explores this concept of inheritance. You sort of touch upon that in your reading about like your how anxious your son is, and then that your anxiety of when you were a kid. And you know, in the rest of the essay, you describe the environment you were raised in, like the overly protective rules, and how you internalize your parents' constant worries, and how they manifested physically. Like you talk about like nail biting and developing TMJ, and you're also really careful not to recreate this type of environment for your children. But yet, like, you know, the worry still seeps out, and may have been passed on, like what you're showing. Yeah. What you're showing in your reading, particularly to your oldest. And there's one part in this essay that just floored me. And that's when a social worker asks you how you respond when your son gets anxious. And you answer, I put up a shield of faux calm. And then the social worker suggests a therapist so that you might respond to him with real calm, and instead of faux calm, which is, yeah. And then in capturing this exchange, you reflect on her suggestion with this great line. In this equation, I am both his nature and his nurture. So, and can you tell us what you mean by that? And also the process of like tracing the lineage of your anxiety and your son's anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of the aim of this essay, in a lot of ways, was to try to tease apart nature and nurture. I'm certainly not the first to attempt that undertaking, and surely will not be the last. And it's pretty folly because it's an impossible undertaking. And I think I mentioned to you, Elizabeth, that my therapist had said to me, she thought the essay itself was a symptom of my anxiety. And that was a working title for a little while. Like, this essay is a symptom of my anxiety, because I felt this probably motivated by guilt, which reminds me a lot of what you explore in your book, but for seeing these symptoms emerge. And I had pretty serious anxiety when I was a young kid, and may or may not still have it today. And you know, as a mom, you try really hard to not pass on, to the extent one can control anything, but you try not to pass on things that you feel like you can control. And so when I saw my son acting in certain ways, I felt certain that this was what that these symptoms were, you know, evidence of something that I was guilty of giving him. It turns out not to be the case. But what I meant by I am both his nature and his nurture is that I am the environment he is exposed to, and I am also, you know, the genes that he has, and you know, how to know what will affect what, and what, if any, control at all do I have as a mother? The answer is probably zero. Mm-hmm. But I still feel compelled to try. So I feel like that gets at your question, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a, yeah.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that, you know, inheritance is so central in your book too. And you dig much further into the past than I do. I mean, I dig into just my childhood, which I was able to suss out, you know, through looking at old photos and journals, and also salient memories that I still hold. But you dig back into the history of Okinawa, which is your mother's birthplace. And it seems like so much of the mission of your book is to explore what your mother brought with her when she came with your father, who was an American soldier, and married him and moved to this country, and what you did or did not inherit from them both, but equally what your mother inherited from growing up impoverished in a country that was just ravaged by imperialism and misbehavior.
Mhm, mhm.
Kindly. So I'm interested in how you think about this term, and you also had a beautiful quote about how you feel like the ways in which trauma gets metabolized across generations. And I was wondering if you could speak about how you saw that term at work in your book.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, it's incredible to me. Obviously I wasn't aware of it as a young child, but like just how much you just like sense from your mother and take on from your mother, not to make you feel
Don't say that.
I'm sorry. No.
I'll just have some wine. Go on.
Here we go. Cheers. But yeah, my mother had she was just like she's very lonely and sad, and throughout my childhood, and I had no idea like about her history or Okinawan history, so I had no idea where this like her pain and sadness came from. I just thought like this is just her, right? And I just blamed her for it. So but much too late in my life, I learned about this history, like the Battle of Okinawa, how it it destroyed and devastated the whole island. A third of the population was killed. The whole landscape was like crushed and burned by bombs. And so my mother was born 3 years after the war, but she grew up with all this grief and the poverty, as you mentioned, like just completely impoverished. And then she also witnessed the militarization of the island and all the bad behavior, the crimes.
There was just so much bad behavior. I didn't even know how to synthesize it.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Exactly. How do you, right? Like what crimes, bad behavior, like so and this confined her to certain life choices, right? Like there's only certain opportunities available to her, and it set her up for how she's going to navigate the world, and then also how she was going to raise me. All right. And then I, like I was saying before, like I took that on without even realizing it, right? Like this sadness and pain, and then it put me on a certain trajectory, and how I was going to navigate the world, and that's how this trauma perpetuates. And so it's like how like incorporating this theme was to go back and forth in time, and to go back in time, the history of Okinawa, my childhood and my upbringing, and show how it all connects. But I think what made it even more difficult for my mother and me was that she couldn't explain herself. She couldn't teach me this history
because of the language barrier.
Exactly, because of the language barrier, but also like I think that there's like a cultural barrier too, and then this like internalized inferiority, right? Like of just well, my history doesn't matter, right? And then and of course it does,
Hence the title of your book.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just it's everything. But yeah, that was one of the hardest things, is that not being able to like feel like not being able to learn this from my mother, having to learn this from other places. And it's actually one of the things I really really appreciate from your book is like watching you teach your sons. Like this is like like it's this kind of like explicit instruction. There's many scenes where you're teaching your sons like important lessons and like having these intense discussions, and you're sort of grappling with them as they encounter this like mature subject matter, right? Like that just comes from the world.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I wonder if that's something like, where you're because you're a writer, right? Like because you're constantly working at like asserting your point of view and your truth. If this is something that you think that maybe you're more prepared for to have these conversations, like yeah, I'll just like
Yeah, I mean, I have so many thoughts on this. Number one is just because I say things doesn't mean my children listen. So there's a difference, I think, between like offering a message or advice or, some stories and how they are received. But I also think there's a difference between off-the-cuff conversations with my kids and the sort of quiet meditative space I reserve for writing. I'm definitely not as articulate in my daily life as I try to be in my book. And it is a way that I work through big ideas. Like, for example, I really don't want to raise assholes. Like, I have two sons, and in this book, I explore the ways in which, I experienced misogyny and bad behavior and anti-Semitism and all the things, all the ways in which I want to run interference to the extent, again, we can circle back to inheritance, to the extent I can, to the extent anything I say will make a difference because the world's pressure is so intense and the messaging they're receiving from every other source is so loud.
Yeah.
But to the extent I can try to run interference, I do my very best to point out all the moments when I see, bad behavior, or all the ways in which I think they can reconsider something from like a less male, less white point of view. I don't know how this goes, but I try.
Oh no, that was one of the things, like a couple moments like stood out to me when your sons are singing that song "I Gotcha." It's like from the Reservoir Dogs soundtrack. It's a very catchy tune, and I had no idea how I had no idea it was about date rape. Like neither did your sons, obviously. But then how you're just how you're very like willing to have these conversations, and you're not you don't shy away from them. But also I see, like, when I was reading about them, what was so interesting is that I can see like the translation on the page. You go into like I'm an adult, I'm a conscientious adult, socially conscious, and I want to be a good parent and not raise assholes. And then also how you are like translating it in ways that they can understand. And I think like it's very deft the way you do that. But I also love the way you show yourself kind of fumble a little bit. Like, I don't, yeah.
I certainly don't pretend to know what I'm doing, and I hope I'm glad that you see me stumble, because that seems really important to show. This is not a parenting guide by any stretch of the imagination. But since you brought up the ways in which I try to run interference against things like misogyny, this seems to play a significant role in Speak Okinawa. And it's also tied to inheritance, the way you explore it. You talk about the various ways in which women on the island were exploited and continue to be. And also, earlier you mentioned your mother's sort of internalized sort of deference or quietude and sort of cultural limitations that prevented her from talking to you about her history. And you are really like beautifully vulnerable, I think, about the way that you, I don't know, inherited or not, but embody some of these same qualities. You talk about interactions with men, the way in which you allow them to devalue you. And I wondered if you saw connections between the way your mother is positioned and the kind of mistreatment you endured, and how you think about misogyny's presentation in this book.
Yeah, that took me a long time to
Which
to
part? The connection?
to see those connections, right? Like the about the history of Okinawa and just the history of sexual assault on that island. Like it's pretty horrifying.
It is horrifying.
And
And
then also,
I knew so little. I was really glad to have learned about it.
yeah, and I knew so little too. And because there's a reason for that. Yeah, so it took me a very long time to see the connections. Even when I knew like both these things happen, and then just be like, oh, but yeah, they're all the same systems, right? Like it's who who has power, who doesn't have it, what people will do in order to maintain the power, and then and like you said, like it's then for the people who don't, right? Like how do we get like stability and security, and or like that was the case for my mother, right? Like just how do I get to be safe in this world? Like, oh well, I'll latch on to someone with power, and then for me it's just like, well, how do I validate myself? Like, oh, I will just subject myself to like, yeah. Yeah, bad behavior, there we go. But yeah, it's yeah, the systems keep happening, and it's I think they may have taken on like new forms and manifestations, and like sometimes they're less overt than they used to be, but sometimes tragically they're not.
I feel like, as a follow-up today, to acknowledge this sort of uptick in violence against Asian Americans, and particularly Asian American women, and the ways in which Asian American or Asian stereotypes continue to persist in this country. And there's, in this same scene where you talk about, your sexually mistreated adolescent self, you say that there's like a nod to how you're, quote, a member of a race that has been fetishized. And I wonder if you can talk about how you consider this reality in the memoir, and what you set out to show the reader, because obviously a lot of these elements, are garnering new attention right now. And I think your book does a beautiful job of shining a light on important histories.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't. Again, it's something that came to light. So it feels like so late in my life that this was why I was treated this way, and this is why I was allowing myself to be treated this way. It's like it's all in the air,
Right.
and then we're all just absorbing it, and yeah, and the stereotypes are, they're to dehumanize, right? This is recurring throughout all of history, like to dehumanize, to justify exploitation, and I think the uptick is very scary, and I think maybe it has it's about, like, again, like the power, like just holding on for holding on and just trying to assert it, and and maybe because they're losing it just a little bit, like the desperation of it, So yeah, I don't. But I, just to, it's like kind of veering, because we're talking about misogyny and patriarchy, and yeah, there's these overt and violent ways that it happens, but but what's also really hard to see too is like the quiet ways, like the very
Which
subtle.
I think opens the door for the violent ways, right?
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, but just this idea of, that it's just it's so ingrained that we don't even see it. Um, and and I want to talk about the essay Ultrasound, which is one of my favorite essays from the collection, and but I do feel it touches upon the same topic, because it's about you trying to get to know your mother and get close to your mother, and trying to excavate years of her life before you were born, and like when she was this rock star folk singer, opening for the Doors, and sharing a stage with Van Morrison, and having a love affair with Jimi Hendrix, which is really, really cool. Like,
Isn't
really
it cool?
it's very awesome.
This is the only thing that made me cool as a teenager was her past. Yeah.
I don't think that's not the only thing that made you cool.
Oh.
But it's a really, really cool thing. But there's also, like, you cast this kind of sadness to it, which I think was just really, like, beautiful and heartbreaking, because it's this time of her life that's supposed to be so glamorous, and yet she was kind of also, like, maybe like sort like in the shadow of all these men, even though and she was in the duo, and she was but she always was a backup singer, and even though she was, like, more talented, had a better voice, and I don't know, I thought that, like, it's just like this, it's so sad, and also that she didn't want to, like, share the personal details of this experience, and, like, never let you listen to her sing. And, like, I love the part, just like how you craved this from her in the essay, because you wanted to see her, like, shine, like her brightness, but she kept this to herself. And there's this really beautiful part that you write, and it says, I was learning that art was a language, and I wanted to hear her communicate. This is because my mother is enigmatic, private, struggles to articulate thoughts and feelings, so rarely does. As a kid, I wanted things from her I couldn't name, not just affection, though I wanted that too. I wanted more of her. And this is very lovely. And I relate to this longing so much. Like, that's like that. I think that's why I gravitated towards this essay, because it's like, that's what I wanted from my mother. Like, I want, just even when I rejected her as a kid, but it's just like that idea of, like, I want more of her. And I'm wondering if you thought, like, maybe, I guess, like, what your thoughts are of how that ties into what we're talking about before. Like, do you think, like, this longing for the mother is like maybe universal, or like a common experience, because it's because women were denied so much for so long? Like, yeah.
I think I can't speak for sons with fathers,
Right.
but I do think that I suspect that so many children want things from their parents that they don't receive. I mean, I can only speak as the daughter of a mother, but I think there is, sort of this needs unmet or desires unfulfilled, because all parents are imperfect. And this is me giving myself a pass also. Notice how I do that, but
you deserve one.
I think
we all do.
It's impossible to meet the needs of, like, multi-dimensional angular humans, especially when you have more than one, or even if you have only one. It's just an impossibility. And so inevitably there will be this. But yes, I do think this longing is part of what drew me to write pretty thoroughly about motherhood, even before I wrote this book.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
I think Maris.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Hi.
pop in here
Uh-huh.
and remind you that if you have a question for Elizabeth and or Courtney, you can put them right in the chat. And I was hoping both of you could talk a little bit about taking the personal and making art out of it, and what are the challenges there, and how do you separate the personal life from the creative one?
Yeah, I can answer. I mean, I'll just say, I think the separation is really important. And I'm glad you used that word. I think there's a misunderstanding and a misconstrual of books that are personal and non-fictional as tell-alls. And I don't think either our books are that per se. And I mean, I'll speak more for mine because I obviously know it better. There's so much that is not included. In fact, probably the most vulnerable making experiences and moments and most troubling experiences are not in here. And I think this is a question each artist has to make for his or herself: what makes it in and what doesn't make it in, and what are you comfortable including? But I felt like so long as I worked hard to create compassionate portraits that had both shadow and light, that I was okay putting it out into the world. This applies to myself as well. I really am deeply flawed and wanted to make that clear in the book. And I don't know how else a reader would have trusted that or trusted anything I shared otherwise. But I think the moving from the personal into the public sphere, requires a lot of difficult choices and careful choices.
Mhm. Yeah, that's oh gosh. When you're talking about like just what what you can share, right? Like it's yeah, I feel like I'm condensing, I have to condense and like accelerate this real life experience for, to to make it like a narrative, right? And then like so much that gets left out, I feel guilty about, but it is impossible. And because I want to put it on there. I want to make the people that I'm rendering like as complete as possible, like as close to who they are as possible. And I think that's so important though, Courtney, that you're talking about like the darkness and the light, like their flaws and their virtues, is because no one will believe you, right? If you just talk about their virtues, they're not, no one, like, it's about establishing trust with the reader too, because it's like, well, you're full of shit, like,
Right.
yeah, like there's no way this person is just all good and like or you're just all good, like you're not
Such
the
a
hero.
person does not exist. If they do,
Yeah.
I'd love to meet them. No.
Exactly. And I think you're doing a disservice to the people that you're rendering if you just show them in only in a good light, because they're not, because then they're not human, and you're lying, like and I think we all want, we all I maybe I shouldn't say it. I shouldn't speak for everybody. Like we all want, I want um uh like uh um I want people to know, right? Like what happened to me and what I did. Like, but I want to be like, I want an accurate assessment of me, like when people read it. So mhm.
On that same kind of topic, I wonder if there are other depictions of mothers and or daughters that spoke to you and influenced your writing.
the first one that comes to my mind is T. Kira Madden's memoir, Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls. And I actually just finished teaching it. So I think one of the most beautiful ways Kira renders this relationship, which is about her drug-addicted mother and her difficult childhood, is by upfront in the first few pages, she said, everything my mother did was because she loved me. Remember that. She said, like, all she wanted was to love me. She only wanted me to be safe. Remember that. And I think to read the rest of the book through that lens, it just like, it's heart crushing, because there are so many errors that her mother makes and so many ways in which Kira suffers as a consequence, but it's not because the intentions were ill. So I just really admired the way she rendered a compassionate portrait of a problematic relationship.
Mhm. I can't believe I'm just blanking, I'm like, what? I was just like, what mother-daughter, because there's so many, right? And one of the books I read was autobiography of my mother, Jamaica Kincaid, and it's fiction. But again, like it was very inspiring of just like, because I was doing the same thing, and just like, how do I create my mother? Because I mean, even though she's there, she's a real person, but I felt a lot of it is just like I had to, because she couldn't tell me as much as I wanted to know. It was like I have to imagine, like I just have to imagine who she, just based on what I know, everything that I know about her. I have to try to figure out who she was, and kind of like delve into that sort of imaginary world. But I mean, fiction or not, like I feel like that's kind of what we all have to do. Like they're, they exist.
Yeah. Courtney and Elizabeth, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Everyone in the audience, please, if you can, buy a book, Speak Okinawa or Spilt Milk, or both. I posted links in the chat, and thank you.
Thank you for having us. It was great to talk to you, Elizabeth. I think we can't hear her. I don't know.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.